I've been a big fan of the original Halo series for most of my life, and I've played each game numerous times over. I thought I'd make a video ranking every level from the original trilogy, being Halo Combat Evolved, Halo 2 and Halo 3. I chose not to include Halo 4, 5 and Infinite because I don't know Halo 4 that well, Halo 5 I never finished, and Infinite I've never even played. Yet. I tried my best to rank these levels based on the actual level design, what it adds to the overall story, and factoring in enjoyment on subsequent playthroughs. The Halo series has always been a place for very passionate, civil discussions among peers. So please let me know in the comments any of your thoughts on my list or your personal favourite levels from the series. Starting off at number 32, we've got the library. This is probably the most agreed upon worst level in the Halo series, and for good reason. You're running through dark hallways and corridors that all look the same, over and over for about 25 to 30 minutes. This level is just way too long and has very little variety. Number 31, Keys. I don't really enjoy this entire first area before the ship. I do enjoy some of the fights in the Covenant ship, but the constant explosions make it kind of frustrating. Every time you throw a grenade, it's like launching a tactical nuke in one of these hallways. The main redeeming aspect of this level is the multi-faction fights, which are pretty chaotic. Number 30, Sacred Icon. This level is just the library part 2. The main draw that Sacred Icon has over the library is that the visuals in this level are so much more varied and interesting. Towards the end, you get to an outdoor section which is quite different to the rest of the level and a little bit more enjoyable. However, it ends in a fairly dull holdout section. At 29, we've got the very next level, Quarantine Zone. It's basically a continuation of Sacred Icon. I do enjoy the vehicle section where you're driving through a battlefield. It's also cool to see the Flood driving vehicles for the first time. The level kind of feels like a bit of a mess at certain points as you're moving through all the debris, and the gondola at the end just kinda sucks, with the Flood AI being quite buggy and annoying. Number 28, Uprising. This level feels the most like filler out of all the Halo series. I think the fact that it's mushed between two great levels, Gravemind and High Charity, makes it even less memorable. It is cool to see the war between the elites and brutes firsthand from the Arbiter's perspective, but the level itself is just not that interesting. The rooms and hallways at the beginning don't add anything new, and I'm not a huge fan of the driving section at the end either. Number 27, Cortana. I actually like this level more than I think most other people do. The theme of a place being completely overrun by the Flood is a really interesting aesthetic that I really wish we got to see more of. All the webs and spore pods is such a great addition to the sci-fi horror of the Flood. I think it's just the lack of variety in visuals that brings it down for me. Number 26, Sierra 117. Sierra always felt like a very meh level to me. The jungle is a cool new setting for the series, but wears off quite quickly. There's not many really interesting encounters, it's just a very average Halo level. There isn't anything particularly that I dislike about Sierra, and it does have a decent amount of variety in its encounters. It's just kind of bland. 25, Savo Highway. Story-wise, there's almost nothing going on. We finished Halo 2 fighting on a flood-infested High Charity, and now we're driving down a highway through brute blockades. It's an enjoyable level to turn your brain off and play, but in the grand scheme of the trilogy, it doesn't offer much. Number 24, Outskirts. If you play the level as intended, the holdout at the beginning is pretty slow, although the Hunter introduction is quite cool. I like the idea of fighting through alleyways on Earth, but the execution is just a bit off, with the sniper jackals being totally overtuned, making the whole section quite frustrating. If the execution was a bit better and faster paced, I think I'd enjoy Outskirts a lot more. Number 23, The Oracle. I think the fact that this level has two holdout moments, one on the elevator and right after in this room, drag it down a fair bit. I do enjoy the setting of a facility suspended in space, and the backtracking part is done quite well. The part in lowered gravity is also quite cool. The boss fight, like most bosses in Halo 2, is pretty meh. Number 22, Crow's Nest. If you take every level in the trilogy that's set in a UNSC base or UNSC ship, Crow's Nest has to be the least interesting by far. It just doesn't really have any cool set pieces I'd expect from a 26th century military base. I do, however, quite enjoy the fight in the barracks, and we're shown how menacing the brutes can really be, and how unique they are in their encounters, with stuff like the brute chieftains and the brute squads. 21, The Great Journey. I enjoy this part at the beginning, fighting the wraiths and spectres. The interior fights are fun enough, teaming up with hunters and high-rank elites against brutes, and Johnston in the Scarab is awesome. I don't know why, but the Banshees are absolutely fucking cracked in this section, even on normal difficulty. The Tartarus fight is really great, story and aesthetic wise, but gameplay it's just okay. Number 20, Two Betrayals. The main criticism that Combat Evolved's second half receives is regarding the backtracking, and I think Two Betrayals suffers the most from this. There are a decent amount of changes from Assault on the control room, like the Banshee sections, the Flood and their fights with the Covenant, as well as the underground section that forces you on foot, but it still just feels too samey with Assault on the control room. The Forerunner rooms and hallways just aren't interesting enough to warrant running through them a second time. There's not much I actively dislike with 2 Betrayals, it's just too similar to previous experiences. Number 19, Truth and Reconciliation. There are some really cool sections like the fight at the gravity lift and running through the inside of a Covenant ship for the first time. For me, the level drags on just a little too long. Mix that with the purple hallways that all look a little too similar, and I find myself getting a bit bored by the end of the mission. I think if they made the prison section closer to the control room, or cut out some of the hallway sections earlier in the level, it would flow a bit better. Number 18, the Arbiter. Like the level name implies, this is our gameplay introduction to the Arbiter. I like the idea of Covenant factions fighting against each other, and the story of hunting down a heretic and his forces. The level design is pretty good. I like all the conveyor belts at the beginning and in the hangar. It gives it a great mechanical Forerunner factory vibe. The narrow corridors and interiors are fun for gunfights, and the Banshee escort I think is neat. Number 17, the Storm. I love the momentum of this level where you go from interior close quarter hectic gunfights to outdoor large scale battles back and forth. It's a really cool dynamic. The holdout part is one of the better holdout sections of the series, and the introduction of the Scarab is great. Giving the Scarab its own AI was a brilliant idea from Bungie and allows you to replay the fights differently every time, approaching it however you'd like. Number 16, Metropolis. The previous 2 levels established the urgency and danger of the Covenant being on Earth, and now it's time to fuck shit up. You've got a great amount of variety within vehicle-based encounters, from the bridge, to the tunnel, to this section, to the streets. I keep hearing people downplay how cool the Scarab is on this level compared to Halo 3's Scarabs, but I think it's fun. Number 15, the Maw. The Maw is a pretty great final level. You return to where you started in attempts to end the Flood before they can escape Halo. Returning to a familiar place after the Flood have run through it is, again, a very cool experience, and the Pillar of Autumn is an area that I already enjoy the design of. I've personally never been a fan of the reactor section. I almost always fall off one of the reactor pipes at some point and have to run all the way back up. And no, this is not a skill issue. Besides that, the Warthog run is an all-time classic and really ties up the end of the game very well. Number 14, Floodgate. Backtracking through familiar areas isn't a new concept for the Halo series, but the idea of playing through a level that's in the midst of being overrun by the Flood, directly after you went through it fighting Covenant, is great. The urgency of the Flood landing on Earth is probably the most horrific possibility in the entire trilogy. I think the level geometry is different enough from the Storm that it actually feels like you're playing a new level, not just backtracking through the one you just played. Definitely my favourite backtrack level of the series. Number 13, Regret. The Forerunner architecture at the beginning and throughout the underwater sections are really fun set pieces to fight on and around. They feel similar to Combat Evolved but have a fresh coat of paint on them to keep it new. I don't particularly love the gondolas, but the fights on them kind of remind me of a pirate boarding when a second one comes up to yours, which is a fun thought. The Regret boss fight is pretty bad gameplay wise, but I like the thematic of it. At 12, we've got Halo from Halo Combat Evolved. There are so many Halo staples introduced for the first time in this one level. It's the first time we touch down on a Halo ring, the first time we see Forerunner architecture, the first time we get to drive the Warthog, and it's also the first time we're introduced to the more open type vehicle levels, which are some of my favourite. There's so much mystery and fear of the unknown as you're fighting for your own life amongst these alien structures, trying to rescue any survivors from the Pillar of Autumn. My only gripe is the end section can drag on a bit where you have to save all the Marines. Number 11, 343 Guilty Spark. I had a really hard time placing this level on my list. In terms of story, it's one of the most important in the series, setting up one of the main antagonists of the trilogy. It's also probably one of the most iconic reveals in gaming and completely recontextualizes Halo Combat Evolved. The creepy facility is a really cool setting, and the atmosphere in the swamp and facility is fantastically crafted. The main critique I have for 343 Guilty Spark is that on subsequent playthroughs I usually find myself speeding through most of the encounters just due to how similar everything looks. At number 10, we've got Halo from Halo 3. We're now in the top 10, and honestly, almost any of these next levels could probably be my top 3. The main reason that this level is in the top 10 is really for the Warthog run. This is straight up one of the coolest moments in all of gaming. I don't even care that it makes no sense that the Flood are over here, and that none of these platforms or structures even resemble anything from the Halo rings. I just like driving with cool explosions and big jumps. The first half honestly isn't that interesting gameplay wise, but the implications of Master Chief and the Arbiter storming the control room to stop the rings from being rebuilt while being swarmed by the Flood and Gravemind's final efforts is awesome. At number 9, High Charity. Watching the Flood firsthand destroy and rip through the Covenant's home is so cool and terrifying. The level Gravemind lets us watch the Covenant begin to fall apart, and then in High Charity we get to see the Flood just rip through what's left. It's a pretty short level, but the horror aspects in it are really great. Number 8, Assault on the Control Room. I love the snow setting. The bridges are a really cool set piece, and the open vehicle section gives you a good taste of a lot of the encounters and level designs of Halo. The indoor sections drag on a touch too long but are still fun and chaotic. There's not that much that I have to say about this level, it's just really solid. At number 7, we've got Delta Halo. We've got a good variety of close quarter and longer range gunfights, as well as a great heavy armor vehicle section. Just like I mentioned during Regret, I also love the Forerunner architecture here. Being back on a Halo ring, it gives a feeling of familiarity to Combat Evolved, but it still manages to provide a different experience due to the level design and enemy placements. Number 6, Pillar of Autumn. The Pillar of Autumn is such a fantastic introduction to a game and the Halo series. It presents the Covenant in such a menacing way as they're boarding your ship, killing everyone on sight. The tight corridors make for a chaotically fun level. It somehow manages to be a great tutorial level for new players, but at the same time is still really fun replaying it. Number 5, the Silent Cartographer. Silent Cartographer in my mind is one of the best examples of Bungie's level design. The island itself is fairly small, but they managed to squeeze every inch out of it. By the time you finish the level, you've literally explored the whole place, under and above ground, but it doesn't feel encumbering. All the interactions are fun, from the beach fights, the hunters in the middle, the warthog parts, to the grunts and jackals inside the underground. Number 4, Cairo Station. Cairo Station is literally peak sci-fi space station design. The fight in the hangars are great. The Covenant are role-playing as space pirates again, latching onto the station with their boarding parties. The part when you see the other station blow up, realizing the Covenant have brought a bomb with them onto Cairo Station, is so thrilling and scary. All of the encounters are enjoyable, and the low-gravity space sections are a very cool addition that doesn't feel like a gimmick. The cutscene at the end is probably the best of the entire series. Number 3, The Ark. I love how the beginning of the level is an homage to Truth and Reconciliation, where you're up on a ledge sniping at Covenant squads. The part where the Forward Unto Dawn comes down onto the Ark and blows everything away is so iconic. The tank section that follows is pretty fun and leads to an all-out battle that has such a grand scale to it that we haven't seen before, with the Covenant and a Scarab. It really feels like an all-out war. The indoor sections are fun, and I like the Brute Chieftain fight at the end. Number 2, Gravemind. Running through the Covenant's home while a civil war is breaking out has to be one of the coolest settings for a level ever. It feels like the first time we get to see the Covenant architecture that actually reflects their personality. The moment when you finally get outdoors is so breathtaking, looking at all the scenery. I absolutely adore these outdoor sections, especially this part when the Amber Clad flies overhead. It's so fun watching all these Covenant factions we've been fighting against now fighting each other, hardly even interested in you. I don't think there's a single gunfight that feels forced in this whole level. Every section flows from one to another so smoothly. At number 1, we've got the Covenant. This is basically the Halo level. Just story-wise, it's so important. The Arbiter's story comes to a close as he puts an end to Truth, and the Covenant as we know them are finished. The entire level feels like a grand adventure. It's like Bungie took everything they learned from their best levels and rolled it all into this one. The interior sections have a great variety of fights and encounters, the Hornet section is very cool, the tank run is great, and the dual Scarab fight is one of the most epic moments of the whole series. The twist at the end where you're working with the Flood is also interesting and unexpected. The Covenant is such a long level, but it never drags on by constantly switching up what you're doing and keeping it fresh. This level is essentially the climax of the Covenant UNSC war, and both parties are throwing absolutely everything they have at it, and it makes for a fantastic level. And that's my list for the original Trilogy levels ranked from worst to best. I'm sure there were plenty of placements that people would disagree with, but just remember that this is the objective ranking and everyone else is wrong. Let me know in the comments what you thought and what you would change. Thanks so much for watching.